You seem to still be up there somewhere.
Maybe I am. There are flying saucers.
Supposing they're Martians or something in there.
Hey guys, welcome back to another Weird Wednesday. I'm Ashers, and this is...
Tobias.
Tobias, how was your long weekends?
It was great. I have had an excellent couple of weekends since we last recorded, and they've been really, really good. You know, I've been, of course, participating as much as possible in my various nerd hobbies. So lots of playing role-playing games and things of that nature. I just played some Castles and Crusades over the weekend, and it was fun as always. I have been getting into some games that I have owned for a while but have not been able to play until recently. So for anybody out there familiar with the Warhammer 40K IP, there is a tabletop role-playing game for that called Wrath and Glory that I have been playing weekly with some friends at Noble Knight Games in Fitchburg, Wisconsin. And that has been a ton of fun. Big fan. And otherwise, I just started playing a little Outgunned with some friends of mine, which is a cinematic action game. So check that out if you're a fan of action movies. But yeah, you know, I love that stuff. I love doing it. Can't stop, won't stop. I'm just going to keep playing my tabletop role playing games. Otherwise, in just general being a weirdo news, I have been getting ready for Haunted America, and I'm putting a workshop on there. And the subject of the workshop is about the utility of consciousness in paranormal investigation, because it has long been my opinion that most of the gadgets and gewgaws that are sold for, God, way too much money to detect ghosts and spirits and speak to them and things probably don't work. Don't seem to work. I've never seen any compelling evidence that they actually work. And so the only tool that I have ever found that seems to in any way be capable of, with any reliability, detecting or recording paranormal phenomena is the human mind. And I think that depending on what you are trying to prove, if specifically your interest is in trying to prove this to yourself, it's the only tool you need. It's the only tool you will ever need. And of course, if you're trying to prove this scientifically, then, well, sorry, we're probably just not there yet, you know, technologically. But that's going to be the subject of my workshop, is exploring various ways, techniques that we can use to incorporate more of our own consciousness, or at least be aware of how our own consciousness interacts with paranormal phenomena, and maybe how we can use that to our advantage. So I'll likely start off with an overview of of what consciousness might be. There are, of course, some competing theories, and get into paranormal phenomena a little bit, and sort of the nature of those phenomena, some of the things that they have in common, how they seem to interact with us, and what part consciousness might play, and then kind of see where it goes. I've got a number of different techniques that I would be willing to talk about. I have limited time, so we'll probably have to pick one to really get into. Like if people want to do like an Estes method session, we can do that, and I'm planning on it because I have a feeling that's kind of where that's going to go. But we'll probably have time for a couple of people to do that, and that's going to be the whole workshop. But there are other interesting methods that I at least want to mention, like sigil creation, or casting runes, or dowsing rods, pendulums, things like that. And of course, the various scientific phenomena that overlap with those as well, like the ideomotor phenomenon and things of that nature. It's a very, very complicated subject that is also very, very, very interesting, and it's something I've been thinking a lot about for quite a few years. So I am excited to share some of those thoughts with other people, and hopefully we'll all learn something.
That's very exciting, and it's really it feels good because you'll have a whole audience there, like a whole, all these participants that are so eager to try it out.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not like you can like walk into the office at work, right, and be like, "Hey, y'all want to try to contact some ghosts?" And they're not going to be like too excited about that, right? So it's a great opportunity to get yourself reinvigorated with the paranormal. I love that.
Yeah, very true. Very true. So that is what I have been spending my time on. What are you doing? What's Asher's up
Oh
to these
man,
days?
I have been up to a lot. Let me tell you, I have seen probably a minimum of 150 kittens over the past 2 weeks.
Okay.
It's been a lot. As everybody knows, one of my beloved cats passed away a little over a month ago, and my surviving cat, he's always had a cat in his life. They were brothers, or they literally grew together in the womb, right?
Mhm.
So of course we were going to get another one. And I've been looking and looking. Man, it has been treacherous to find an animal. I don't remember it being this difficult. As a matter of fact, my aunt originally rescued um, a mom, a mom and her litter, and I went to her house, and I was only supposed to get one, but I got two, and then I went home, and that was that. Never looked at any other cats or put any thought in any other cats. This has been a lot of work, and maybe I'm just overthinking it, but I suppose when you know, right? And I haven't hit that opportunity yet over all the kittens
Okay.
that I've seen. So we're still searching, but it has been great, of course. Hanging out with all those kittens is awesome. So that's fun.
Sure. No, I
Um,
bet. Well, what's the obstacle?
I don't. Well, okay, so it depends on what it is.
Okay.
Some rescues, like one rescue I walked into, and I had two in mind, right? Because I'm open to doing an adult cat too. It doesn't have to be a kitten.
Sure.
I because my cat's 15, right? An adult cat actually might suit him better. Um,
Oh, yeah.
because he's old, and so but the thing about adult cats is that they're kind of already set in their ways, right? So it's actually been harder to find an adult cat than a kitten. But I went to one rescue. I had two in mind, a kitten and an adult cat. And I go up to the front desk because I have like a whole kitten room that you just go into. And, I come to the front desk and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to get two out of the cages and let's interact with them. And they're like, oh, do you have an appointment? And I said, no, I don't have an appointment. Oh, we have to do an appointment first. So I walked in there. It was 4 o'clock. They closed at 7 and they had no appointments available for the rest of the day because they had people ahead of me. And so you have to make an appointment. And they said, well, and when you make the appointment, basically you have to already have picked out what cat you're adopting. Like you have to know who you're walking out with that day. And that's just nonsensical to me. You want me to make a 20-year commitment with an animal that I've never even touched? That's
So
weird.
you don't have the opportunity to meet them and then decide if you want to.
No.
Like they can't make you take the cat
Well,
if you don't
no.
want it.
But the appointment is like it's like a whole thing. You go through like your basic, like, who are you, what do you do, what kind of person are you, who lives in your house, what other pets do you have, what do you do for work,
Uh,
and then they call it match counseling. What are you looking for, it's all kinds of stuff. And then they go over then they'll go over like the general medical history of the animal if they have a general medical history. It's like a whole thing. It's like a whole big old appointment. So you can go and sit in on that appointment every time you go and every time you have one in mind. And then finally, after all that, get to meet the cat and change your mind at the last minute, and say, never mind. But then you have to do it every fucking time you want to even pet one of the cats that you're looking at.
you have to refill out that entire
Yep.
application.
Yep.
That's
Every time.
that's the part that bothers me. I get wanting people to fill out an application in advance. That saves everybody time. Like
Yeah.
that's a good idea. But if you're not keeping that on file to reuse it, then all of that time that you saved, you just start wasting it. So I don't get that at all.
Yep. And I've done probably, I have put in an application at the same shelter 5 times and have heard nothing back from them. I have messaged the
Wow.
woman on Facebook. She gave me a really blasé answer, like, "Oh, well, when you see one on our website that you want, make sure you apply." And it's like, "But I've been applying, and you keep not saying anything." It's been insane. So, but the problem is that I can't just go with. I could go with a street cat. There's plenty of those. Plenty of people giving away kittens. But I have a 15-year-old cat. I need to make sure that whatever cat I bring into my house is at least FIV and FELV tested, because I can't risk him getting sick. And so, and of course, nobody does that when they have stray cats. You know, those cats are never vetted. So then, well, if I just take my chances and take it on and it is positive, now I'm stuck with a cat that can't be around my other cat that now I have is a whole problem, right? I have to rehome somehow that's sick, you know? So
Right.
it's a whole thing. It's been a whole mess. It really has been a whole fucking mess. I don't know. These people don't get back to you. It's crazy. I thought that we were overflowing with cats and they were desperate to get him out the door, but here I am. And hasn't happened yet. So
Wow. Well, I hope it gets better. That is wild. It
Thank
should
you.
be a lot easier to adopt animals. You know, it's funny. I've heard you're not the first person who has told me about their difficulty with the pet adoption system. Like it feels as though some rescues, and I'm sure that they're doing this for all of the right reasons, but they put in place these sort of unnecessarily strict guidelines, these restrictions on people who are trying to adopt these animals. And at the end of the day, don't you kind of have to ask, like, look, we have more cats and dogs than we could ever home in this country. That is a fact. Do you want them to get adopted or not? You know, like
Right.
seriously.
Yeah, that's how it is. And like I am the person that all of these shelters, where they started all these shelters, that they dreamt of, right? I'm going, whatever cat I'm going to get, it's going to live at my house for the rest of its life. It's going to be taken care of and spoiled beyond any measure that a normal person usually spoils their animal, right? Like I
Sure.
am the dream adopter. I should be able to walk into any fucking rescue and go, that's the one I want, and take it home. You know, I get that they don't know me, right? I get that. But even like on record, I've got my vet references. I've got, you know, a living cat still at 15 who's doing very well. You know, it's proof. You know, what
Right.
more do you want in order for me to walk out with a new companion? It's just that I feel like they're trying to kind of it's weird, and it would be a big conspiracy, because I've talked to many different rescues at this point. We have a bunch of them locally. And you know, but it's almost like they're trying to just bully me into just kind of settling for whatever animal they have available that they can't adopt. And I know that sounds weird, and it's probably crazy, and it probably is, but that's how it feels. I'm like, I don't get what more I could do here. I don't know. So it's
Wow.
been wild, but I do have 2 in mind right now. They're not ready to go yet. Pretty hopeful that I can at least get one of them, but because I can only pick one, I'd like to revisit them again, and even that has been difficult, because I'd like to see who we kind of bond with and what fits. So I have a little bit of an advantage because it's somebody that I know personally that works at the rescue. So I kind of
Oh,
get
that's nice.
first pick, right? So we're
Yeah.
gonna go that route and see what happens. But I'm still looking. In the meantime, you know, until they're ready, what if I find something else and it's perfect, right? And it works. So
Sure.
doing lots of that. I have been back to D20 now. I guess that seems to be what I do on the weekends. So I have continued to go back there, and
Yeah. You playing some D&D?
I have not played any D&D at all.
Come on.
I have
Killing
only
me.
well, you know, so I've been meeting people though, right? And I'm now in the D20 Discord, so that's really cool, right? So now I'm like in the know on when that shit happens. And but yeah, I've been meeting a bunch of people, so that's been a lot of fun, because that's also been on my list. So I've been enjoying that time, and I've also got other paranormal endeavors coming up. Three different things I want to talk about this weekend. If you guys are catching it early, June the 7th, I will be at the Fairborn UFO Convention at the Holiday Inn in Fairborn, Ohio. If you want to check that out, it is free to come check out the vendors. However, if you want to hear the speakers talk, you do have to purchase tickets. I believe if space is available, there's tickets at the door. But there is a link I'll post in the description if you guys want to do that. But you can just come hang out. You don't even have to buy anything. You can just come, except for my book that of course I know you're dying to get. You can come buy that from me directly, but that's all you got to spend. And so that's coming up. The weekend immediately after that, the 14th, I'm going back to Point Pleasant and doing a lot there. So that's very exciting. For whatever reason, if you were in the Point Pleasant, West Virginia area on June 14th, I will also be there. I've got some people locally, a friend of a friend who's never been. They want to, and the friend's never been either. They want to go and have me like tour them and stuff, but they want like the full paranormal experience. So, we're going to go down, tour the Mothman Museum, tour the, little bit of town Point Pleasant has, and then we're going to go down to the TNT area to get into some weird shit. So if you want to get weird with us, I don't know, let me know. We can figure something out. We can meet up, right? It's free, right? Yeah, you don't have to get my permission to show up, I shouldn't say that. Then we're all going to get killed.
Right.
Somebody, it's remote. There's nobody else there. Right? No one for miles.
You've signed your own death warrant. It would be so easy to hide a body in the TNT area. I'm not trying to give anybody any ideas, but it's true. I mean, it already smells bad.
It does. You just dump them right there in the body of water, and that water doesn't move. That body ain't coming back up.
In the stagnant swamp? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. In the stagnant cancer swamp. Yeah, that's
that's like fucking stagnant cancer swamps are made to hide bodies in. I'd be shocked if there weren't already a few.
It's perfect. So yeah, that'll be fun. And then I have finally found somebody locally who is interested in doing CE5 with me. So I'm going to check that shit out. That's going to be fucking sweet. I don't know how it's going to go.
I've heard other people who have had results, and I got to tell you, I've had results. So, I mean, again, I don't know Stephen Greer personally. I understand the concerns and the allegations that have been levied. I'll just say this. People can be right about something and still do something wrong. That is a thing that happens. So this might be one of those situations. I don't know what to tell you, but it is very, very interesting.
I mean, for like the last 2 years, all I've had are people warning me against it. Don't do it. Don't do it unless you're ready. You need to be ready to do this. No, seriously. And I'm like, well, that has made me even more ready than anything else that I've ever been told my whole career. So I'm excited to figure out what happens. I don't know, but I shouldn't hype it up too much, right? Because then nothing will happen and I'll be disappointed.
Right.
But I've heard good things, so we're gonna check that out. I don't want to go do it by myself, mostly because I am a little intimidated by the warnings that I've had from people that I do trust in this community, but also because it's good to have another party there if something does happen, right? That way, because I could just go by myself and tell you guys that something happened and be like, oh, my camera fucked up and I didn't catch it, Or if somebody's there with me, they could be like, yeah, something did happen and the camera did fuck up, So
right.
It's exciting. So we'll see how that goes. So that's what I've been up to lately. A lot, really. I've been up to a whole hell of a lot. So
yeah, well, we're getting back into going outside and investigating the unusual season.
Thank God.
So things are ramping up again. Yeah.
I'm excited for that. So yeah. So let's get into some news. I know you have one news. I have a news too, but my news is particularly heavy. If you want me to go first, I can.
Ooh, like how heavy on a scale of like 1 to drowning puppies? What are we talking about here?
Well, I'm going to be putting timestamps in the description for people because it does come with a trigger warning. So
I'll just go first. It's fine.
Okay, go ahead.
Like mine's not going to take a super long time anyway, because what it is, and I do love these, is A large, dark-furred primate was reportedly seen by a father and son in Michigan. Now, this just happened a couple of weeks ago. The Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, or BFRO, published a report last month. Published a report last month in which a father and son claimed to have encountered a large ape-like creature near Monroe, Michigan, roughly 35 miles south of Detroit. So the father, Edward, 47, and son, who will remain anonymous because he's 12, were out bow fishing at around 11:30 a.m. on May 18th when, while following Plum Creek deeper into the nearby marshland, they stopped to listen as police sirens sounded in the distance. So what Edward said in the report was, all of a sudden, I heard rustling in a tree to the left and a huge thud hitting the ground from the tree. A big heavy animal hit the ground and crouched and started moving towards me through the brush. Now, at this point, they have a dog with them, and the dog decides to give chase, and it almost catches this thing before the creature shoots off extremely fast through all of this foliage. And the dog decides it's going to follow the creature up this slope as it disappears over it onto the other side. But luckily, it was a good listener. And so when Edward called for it, it came running back. I don't want to think about what might have happened to that poor dog. Anyway, I'm the kind of guy, I turn off the movie if you kill a dog in it. You can kill as many human beings as you want. Like, I love horror movies, but you kill a dog, eat shit. I'm not watching your fucking movie. Like that's the line for me. Anyway, so the dog's okay. Anyhow, at that point, the son yells, "Holy shit, what was that?" It was as big as a bear, but it looked like a gorilla. And that's something that they come back to. Like, they describe this thing as a gorilla. But when they were interviewed by investigator Matt Moneymaker, he said that they described this large, dark-furred primate that ran up a slope on two legs, looking like a gorilla from behind. Now, anybody who's ever seen a gorilla move knows that they don't walk on two legs. They use their arms as well for locomotion. So I'd love to talk to these people myself to kind of reconcile those facts to see, why he described it as a gorilla, but it also walking on two legs, because those things, they don't go together. Like, those two things are oil and water, So anyway, Moneymaker ended up deciding that after interviewing both of the witnesses over the phone, that he found them to be as credible and freshly descriptive about what happened to them as anybody could be. So kudos to them, I guess, for being great witnesses. Now, this entire encounter, anybody who is familiar with Moneymaker's work is going to know that he is a materialist in his approach to the Bigfoot phenomenon. So he tends to lean pretty heavily towards the undiscovered animal hypothesis. So in this report, then, he does get into a lot of qualities about the surrounding area that he believes could allow for the existence of something like a Bigfoot. Because when you look at this area otherwise, this is a developed area, right? So you've got this one natural nature preserve that this father and son were at fishing. But other than that, Monroe is right there. Detroit is not that far north. Like, there's a lot of development and urban sprawl happening here. And so it's not the kind of place that you would expect to see any kind of undiscovered animal, if that's what Bigfoot is, being able to exist without, being discovered, frankly. How would it be able to hide? Now, Moneymaker doesn't really address that point, but what he does say is that in his estimation, the reason why you might see some Bigfoot living in those areas is because of the plentiful food and water, and the relative safety of them being off limits to hunters. So they don't necessarily have to worry about hunters in those regions, because hunting isn't usually allowed in nature preserves in the middle of fucking cities, right? As far as food, he does mention the proliferation of deer and cattails. And yeah, there probably are lots of both. But the thing to me, and I can't help but always come back to this, is deer populations are monitored pretty damn closely. I know here in Wisconsin, which is right next door to Michigan, I don't think they do things too much differently than we do. We monitor our deer populations, like I said, pretty damn close, because you need to know. I mean, well, not the least reason why you would want to know that is so you know how many hunting licenses to issue every year, for instance. But there are also other reasons to look at it. Like, for instance, if you want to know the relative health of your wolf population. Now, we've reintroduced wolves here, and we do have a pretty good population in the northern part of our state. You would want to know what those wolves are eating, right? That's of interest not just to you as a conservationist, but also to farmers. Like, you want to make sure, well, okay, what are these wolves eating? Are there plentiful deer, for instance, for them to eat? Or are they going to be going after farmers' livestock or something similar, right? So all of this stuff gets watched pretty closely. And my point here is, if there was an undiscovered animal that was preying on the deer population, and if you think about how big a Bigfoot is described as being, and the caloric intake they would need daily to maintain that kind of mass, there's just no fucking way that they would be able to prey on these monitored deer populations without anybody noticing. It should be apparent to the people whose job it is to pay attention to these kinds of things. And I know what you're thinking. There's not a conspiracy, guys. There's no evidence for any conspiracy of people hiding this shit. DNR workers, they're just regular people. Like, you can just go up and talk to them. They're just regular, normal, nice people. They love to talk about animals and stuff. That's their whole deal. They're not hiding anything from you. So that always bugs me. And I wanted to point it out here. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, I think it's a pretty interesting report.
So what is interesting is, going on your last bit there about how, it would be obvious that, this type of creature would be living there, is that Matt Moneymaker kind of, I would say within the last year, out of all the years that he's done, the BFRO and has ran the organization, has very recently come out to endorse the possibility that these are not flesh and blood creatures.
What?
I know.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
well,
he
never
did.
mind. My apologies then.
He did. Yeah, no, and he's always been very, very stern about his stance on flesh and blood only, which is fine. It's whatever.
Yeah,
but yeah, it is
deal.
interesting for him to, kind of show that openly, because honestly, I think Matt Moneymaker 5 years ago wouldn't have put this report out there. You know what I mean? Like, because of exactly what you said. It just kind of didn't really make a lot of sense for something like that to live in that area. Right. So, I don't know.
Well, he still took a very materialist approach here, though. Like, there at no point was he like, maybe it came through a portal. No, it lives in these areas because, as we all know, Bigfoot follow specific migratory patterns and eat these kinds of foods and all of this other stuff, all of this other scientific sounding stuff that we have no way of actually knowing.
I agree. But it's just interesting. I mean, now that's the debate. Now, it's not even like is Bigfoot real anymore? Now is Bigfoot an animal or is it something else? Like that's the fight now.
Right.
Which is
No, we're believing in Bigfoot no matter what.
no matter what.
Like that ship has sailed. All right. Like that's no longer up for debate. So if we're determined to believe in Bigfoot, then is it a real animal? Is it just undiscovered? Did it come through a portal? Is it an alien? These are the questions. Yeah. No, you're right. Like that's where we're at.
That's what it is, right? Can you imagine like being out in public? Because being somebody that has been out in public a lot lately, especially hanging out with a bunch of nerds. Let me tell you, yeah, people really don't give a shit about the paranormal. So can you imagine like being out and about at like a bar and like getting into an argument with somebody and you're like, oh, you don't believe in Bigfoot? And they're like, no. And you're just like, yeah, you do. They're like, no, I don't. Yes, you do. You believe in Bigfoot. Just like, what the fuck?
Right. You break a bottle to make a fucking shiv and just like, how about now?
Believe in Bigfoot now. And he's like, yes. And then you're like, I knew it. Everybody believes in Bigfoot.
Right.
That's because that is where it's at now. Either way, interesting reports. I'm sure they experienced something out there. That's definitely, definitely the case. What it was, I don't know. I wasn't there.
Who knows? So. Exactly. I will tell you this. Speaking of nerds, because a lot of the people that I play games with, like they know what I do. And you're right. Like most normal people do not care about this shit, even a little. Like just do not care. But my fellow nerds, they do appreciate the insight that I'm able to bring when like running certain games. So if I want to run a game that will have like gray aliens in it or something, then they know they're getting the authentic gray alien experience from somebody who knows what he's talking about in this game. They still don't believe in any of that shit. But, like if you're going to incorporate what they see as like this mythology, it's better to have somebody who really understands, all of the bullshit.
Yeah, most of the time they don't care about like the facts or anything. Like they just like the surface story, and that's fine. I mean, that's just people in general. Even if they care about it at all, most of the time they care about that surface story. Otherwise, they don't want to hear they don't want to hear nothing else about it.
Right.
It's really interesting. So one of the people that I met at the bar, I'll say this. He was just some drunk guy at the bar. Imagine that. But he said that his dad wrote the Michigan Dogman song. I don't know if that's true, but like Michigan Dogman, to me, like that's not like Bigfoot is vanilla cryptozoology, right? Everybody knows about Bigfoot. Not everybody knows about the Michigan Dogman. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So I don't know if it was true or not, but
that's a pretty deep cut for like a normal person.
It is. Yeah, it is. So, and he didn't know shit about anything else because then he started talking about Annabelle and how they shouldn't be touring her around. And I was like, oh.
God damn it. I thought I was going to get through a whole week without having to hear about that fake ass fucking doll.
No.
But no, I can't get through even 1 week. God, well, it just drives me nuts.
You're welcome. Anyway, okay, we're going to take a second. We're going to get serious. We're going to have a serious talk, you guys. And there's a reason why we have to have a serious talk on this show, because my next news story that I'm going to share, it doesn't have anything to do with the paranormal. And, but there's a reason for it. If you don't want to hear about things like murder and oppression and stuff like that, this is your clue right now. There is going to be a timestamp at the bottom for when you can tune back into the show. But as a fellow human being, I feel with a platform, I feel like I have a responsibility to talk about this. And I wasn't going to say anything. I really wasn't until this morning. So here's my news story. Actor Jonathan Joss, who is near and dear in my heart, for playing the voice actor for John Redcorn and the greatest TV show of all time, King of the Hill, was shot and killed last night. Okay. Jonathan Joss has a lot of issues. It has had a lot of issues probably the last year of his life. His house burnt down back in January. He's definitely been going through a tough time. And I know what you guys are thinking. Why are you talking about this? Well, here's why. I'm going to tell you what happened. Jonathan Joss's husband put out a statement on social media and let everybody know that Joss was shot and killed due to an angry neighbor who shot and killed him. I mean, basically, the gist of it, he was shot and killed for being a gay man. And it's Pride Month, right? This is our first episode of June, and I'm not going to beat you guys over the head with being gay and all that. But I just have been very upset by this whole story, this whole situation. I'm not a big celebrity person. Like, I'm not a big, I love my celebrities, but there are some who are absolute gems, for, who they are and what they do. Jonathan Joss is definitely one of those people. He's had fans that he's never met before, that he stayed up with on the phone for hours at a time, trying to convince him not to kill himself. Like, this man was a gem. And although he had his own issues going on, kind of the story that's coming out right now is that this is very much a hate crime. It's been going on for a very long time, and it has resulted in the man's death at this point. And I just couldn't. This happened to fall on recording day. I have not been able to stop thinking about this. But this is why it's important for me to say something here and now. This is why we have something like Pride. And this is why it's so important for us to be open. I know people are thinking, oh, you got to shove that gay shit down my throat or, whatever. I already know it. I already know the complaints. That doesn't belong here.
Maybe they secretly want somebody to shove that gay shit down their throat.
I think they do.
Know what I mean.
And that's what it's about, right? Little projection you got going on there. And listen, we'll welcome you with open arms. I mean, you don't have to hide anymore. But
it's 2025. Like, you can be gay. Like, just be gay. Don't be mad at everybody about it. Just be gay.
It's nobody else's fault that you're gay. It's your own. Just accept it. But here on Wednesdays we talk weird. We are a gay friendly show. We're always going to be. There's nothing that you're going to say ever that's going to make me change my mind on that. Half of you could stop listening today because of that. And I wouldn't give a shit, because human rights supersede anything else. And that's always going to be important to me. I am pansexual. I date men, women, non-binary. I've had lovers of all walks of life, sometimes at the same time, all the time. So it is an important issue for me. I'm not here to out anybody else, but we definitely had a lot of people in that community on this show. It is what it is, and that's where it's always going to be. And if you have an issue with it, well, you can go fuck yourself. So, Tobias, would you like to say anything about the very serious statement I just put out there?
I don't disagree. I think anybody who has followed me on social media is aware of my stance on human rights and how LGBTQ plus people are to be treated, and that is to say, like anybody else, with the same rights and liberties that everybody else enjoys. And anybody who doesn't like that is wrong. Like, you're objectively wrong. And I guess welcome to the wrong side of history. But the thing is, what I have found over the past few years is every time I post something, in support of Pride Month or trans rights or whatever, I lose fewer and fewer followers every single time. It's amazing to me that I still lose any at all, because it's like, you obviously don't fucking know anything about me if you think that I'm going to join you in whatever bigoted fucking opinion you have. But it's fewer and fewer all the time, and I even know, just from my own personal experience growing up as a kid in the 90s, when, I mean, there's a lot of language used back then that would not fly now. And I have had to spend a significant amount of effort in unlearning a lot of the behaviors that were taught to me as normal growing up, right? But what's important about that is that I did, and lots of other people are too. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how old somebody is, how set in their ways or stubborn or any of that. Anybody can. And I have been seeing a lot of people in my own life who have, and I think that's great. So anybody, and I can't imagine there are a lot of people listening to this show who are going to have real unfortunate opinions about any queer folk out there. But I mean, if they do, I would really, really, really love it if instead of just getting mad, you can get mad at me if you want. I don't care. I don't know you. We'll never meet. It doesn't matter. But maybe take this opportunity for a little introspection, because on the surface, I don't know, dude. I love the NFL. I love going to the shooting range. I love my fucking dogs. And I think that love is love, and nobody should ever feel unsafe because of their gender identity or sexuality. Like, it's that simple. And if I can unlearn all that toxic shit and be a better person, so can anybody. So just do that,
Yeah. Well, and one of the most interesting things when I got into the paranormal was to find out how overrun with extremist right-wing conservatives it was, right? I really didn't know, because here's the thing about it. If you're not gay, because I know what you're thinking, what does this have to do with alien abductions and the paranormal? I'll tell you what it has to do with it. Even if you're not gay, guess what? You're fucking weird. Okay? You are. You're a fucking weirdo, right? You've probably always been a weirdo your whole life. Some of you were extreme nerds growing up. Maybe you were, maybe you weren't, right? You've probably never been the popular kid. Okay? You're fucking weird. And that's okay here. That should be okay here. Being different in the paranormal should be okay. This is where we're supposed to be allowed to be weird at, right? That's what I thought anyway. Like I said, getting into it. And then when I kind of saw that there really wasn't a big group of that, that's why I decided to make a group of that. So that's what I'm here for, is to give a space where you can openly be your weird self. And I'm going to keep doing that for the rest of my life. And you can either join me and accept the fact that you're fucking weird and we love you the more for it, or you can go somewhere else. I don't care. So anyway, like I said, I had to bring it up. Again, I have a platform. Was I even going to throw in a happy pride in there? Probably not. But because this happened, this is literally someone fucking died. A gem of a human being was killed because of the hate that people have towards that community. And it's fucking sick, and it needs to stop. And this story, thankfully, it's getting fucking international attention at this point. People are really talking about it. It sucks that it had to come to this for something like this to be brought to light in that way. But maybe we can stop and do something about it, and do, like Tobias said, do a little introspection and figure out why it has to be, because it doesn't have to be that way. So let's do better. Anyway,
yes.
That was my news.
Okay. No, I did see that. I learned about it today. I saw something on social media. Yeah, no, that does suck. I don't know. I don't have any I don't have anything else important to say about it, I guess, other than what you already have, and people should do better.
Yeah. So, well, let's get back into, what you're here for, right? I'm not going to spend the whole show harping. I said that. Just wanted to mention it. Today
it's the Tobias and Asher's Super Lecture Hour.
Super Lecture Hour this Wednesday. On Wednesdays, we talk human rights. Yep. A little bit this week. You guys know we don't do that shit a lot here, and it's not going to be a new thing, but when it's big, it's big. That's the way it is.
Right.
On to more important matters, right? Like aliens.
Like aliens and what they're doing to our butts.
And what they're doing to our butts, right? Let's talk about some real gay talk, non-consensually. Might I add? So that's the difference here. We're gonna talk about that. So, alien abduction, right? We've all heard the term, and we're all pretty familiar with it. Probably even when I say alien abduction, you probably a couple cases pop into your head. Probably some you've heard on the show. We're all pretty familiar with the concept. Tobias, what's your history with alien abduction? You've been abducted?
Maybe, maybe I would give it a definite maybe. We talked about some of the things that have happened to me through the
Hmm.
course of my life, and there is a lens through which those could be viewed as potential like abduction experiences, frankly. And I guess I just don't know. I have no memories of ever being aboard an alien spaceship or anything like that. But a lot of the nighttime visitation experiences that I've had would be in line with abduction narratives. So I don't know. Who knows? Maybe.
It's a possibility. Well, and some of these instances are also a hard maybe. But what is alien abduction? Let's kind of talk about the guidelines here. So first and foremost, um, I would consider an alien abduction non-consensual. Tobias, do you agree or disagree with that?
Well, I think in abduction, by its very definition, is non-consensual. So I mean, and that's why you hear some people who like to refer to abductees as experiencers instead. They try to avoid that word because they do see it as, if not completely consensual in all cases, at least a beneficial relationship. I don't know that I agree with that, but yeah, absolutely. If you were referring to something specifically as an alien abduction, then it has to be by its very nature, at a minimum, non-consensual.
Yeah. I agree. I think that there should be a clear distinction between. Here's where I draw the line: is y- I think you have abductees, right? Who where it's non-consensual, and sometimes not non-consensual, and like what we think of. It's not them kicking and screaming to get away. Just there's even an influence over their body because some of these cases, there's just kind of an influence over their body where they don't really have a say, but they're not really fighting either. Um, I would consider that non-consensual. But then there's also contactees, right? So if I contact you, right? I contact you, I make contact with you in public, right? I come up to you and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And you walk away from me. That's very different than if I were to abduct you in public, right? That's not the same thing.
True.
Obviously. So that's where, and mentally for me, that's where the line's drawn, at that point in time. Um, you definitely have instances, just because I'm the expert at it, and I know you guys love when I talk about it. The Indrid cold case, right? Not an alien abduction. Indrid stops Woody's car. They have a conversation. They continue to have mutually exclusive conversations going forward that seem to be consensual to both parties. Um, Non-consensual. Betty and Barney Hill are just trying to get home from their vacation, and they didn't really seem to have a choice in the matter, right? They
Sure.
lose consciousness and then regain it, at weird hours later, right? So I think that's obviously the line. What other kind of themes do we see in alien abduction? Um, them.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, go ahead. I was going to say it really runs the gamut, and I think that there has been various evolutions narratively in the abduction phenomenon since it gained widespread popularity in the 1980s, right? I mean, certainly, like there were alien abductions prior to that, but I don't think many people would argue with the idea that the mainstream consciousness surrounding alien abductions didn't really exist until the 1980s. Like most people hadn't really heard of it until we started getting things like um, Whitley Strieber's work, for instance,
Mhm.
or like Stanton Friedman and Kathleen Martin's work with like, well, Betty and Barney Hill, as you mentioned. So anyway, I think that there are a lot of qualities that people could ascribe to the abduction phenomenon. And boy, they don't always. I'll just say this. The lines get really, really blurry, right? Especially between like abductions and contactees. Like at what point does an abduction experience stop being an abduction and start being a contactee case? Because sometimes people will report being forcibly abducted and then given the same kind of message, of nuclear disarmament or climate activism or whatever that a contactee would receive. So there's some significant overlap there. Are these the same thing? Is the method by which this message is delivered, like, is that the deciding factor between abduction and contactee case? Does it matter? But, beyond that, you got everything involved in alien abduction from parapsychology, like telepathic messages. You mentioned the difference between consensual and non-consensual, but some people will report this overpowering feeling that they need to do a certain thing. Often that thing is to go outside. So if they're being manipulated in some way, like a surface reading of that might be, okay, well, they went outside and they encountered this craft. That's not that abduction-y, right? Like they didn't have to go outside. Well, didn't they? Because if they're being manipulated somehow directly through their consciousness, right, to be directed to go outside, then that might be a little less consensual than people think. So there is that element, and the parapsychology and the parapsychological phenomena don't stop there. You do get people who will report psychokinetic effects, either directly through the abduction experience or as a sort of like epiphenomenon that just kind of happens throughout their home while the abduction experiences that they're having are taking place. So it gets real weird real fast, and I don't know that I'm even comfortable making a very solid distinction between contactee and abduction cases at this point. If other people want to, that's fine. But me personally, I just feel like there's something we're missing. I don't have all of the information that I need. There's too much overlap for me to say, they're entirely different, or, I don't think one of them is different enough to be okay versus the other one being not okay,
I think that's a good argument for it. But I think when you apply it in terms of people, like when you think about it's not aliens, but it's people, then it gets a little different, right? Because let's think here. You ever seen Beauty and the Beast?
Yeah.
Belle goes to the castle to save her dad. She's held there as a prisoner against her will. But then she's treated really nicely. And eventually...
she gets Stockholm Syndrome. Yeah.
Right. She gets Stockholm Syndrome. And eventually he gives her the choice to leave or not. Well, because her dad was sick or whatever. And she left, but she came back on her own.
Yeah. People do that shit in cults all the time.
Right. Then is it wrong that the beast was holding her prisoner in the first place?
Correct.
Or
it was
is
wrong.
it okay now?
It's not okay now. She has Stockholm Syndrome. We know that. That is a known phenomenon. People do that shit in cults all the time. That doesn't mean that cults are okay and they're not hurting anybody.
Right.
Just because people go back to them. No, it's because they're fucking brainwashed. Like it's.
But it's all. But like, it's not up to like you or I to be like to look at the victim and go, well, you're fucking wrong because you're fucking brainwashed and you need to do better. Because at the end of the day, it's a very personal experience that you or I can't correctly judge or put judgment towards, because it's kind of up to them to want to get better, right? They have to make those.
Yeah, but I can say, hey, you're brainwashed, so I don't believe your narrative.
Sure. You can, but it's not so black and white. It's kind of what I'm getting at, right? But it's a Disney movie, so we all should root for the outcome, and that was great. But let me tell you guys, let me just remind you, when you root for Beauty and the Beast, Belle was 1,000% down to fuck an animal. Like, she was there for it. So,
oh man,
that's the kind of shit that you're supporting when you support Disney. Beauty and the Beast was always my favorite Disney movie. Belle was my princess.
I'm sure it's fine. I feel bad about it now because I'm just like, man, I didn't want to ruin Beauty and the Beast for people. It's not that deep. Not everything has to be an argument. Yet here I am ruining it for people, making it an argument.
She was gonna fuck that beast. Actually, I've seen TikTok videos going around or whatever of like Belle's face when he transforms into the human, and she's so fucking disappointed. And she is. She's
hilarious.
Anyway.
Right. But no, I understand your point. And that's what I'm saying. It's not black and white.
Right,
the
exactly.
line between contactee and abductee is very blurry. So I'm just not comfortable saying like these cases are contactee cases. These cases are abductee cases, and they're totally different things, because I just don't think that we know that.
But there are cases where it's easy to categorize.
Maybe.
Arguably. I mean, that's what I think anyway. That's my opinion.
Sure.
For what it's worth. Typically in these cases, right, it's not normally, so I wouldn't consider somebody's at home and then aliens come into their house and visit with them and then just like have a conversation and leave. I don't consider that an alien abduction because it didn't go anywhere.
Okay.
So at minimum,
maybe
I think
alien
that you have
intrusion.
to go that would be an alien intrusion. I agree. It depends. Did they knock first and did you let them in?
That never happens.
Consent again. That doesn't ever happen. Like, literally, they must not knock. Like, is that how they operate on their planets? They're just like, I'm here now. They just teleport into your fucking house.
If you came from a species that could just fucking teleport, nobody would knock. Of course, that would be totally normal.
That's why they're all naked. They just gave up on privacy millions of years ago.
Yeah, after like the 50th time you're caught masturbating, you just don't care anymore. It's fine.
Oh, you're here. You can help.
Right.
But I wouldn't consider those abduction cases, right? They're not. I mean, classic abduction cases, somebody against their will is called to go somewhere with these aliens. Most of the time, when you think of classic abduction, it's on their ship, right? There's some medical examination that will take place, typically. Sometimes it involves a lot of focus on the genitals. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there's a message involved. Sometimes they don't say anything and they place these people back at their home and that's it. But the unspoken phenomena that happens here, I would argue is the missing time cases. What the fuck happens to those people? They don't know because they don't know. They don't remember, right? They were maybe they saw a craft, maybe they saw a flash of light, maybe they saw the beings beforehand, and then boom, nothing else. They're by themselves in a weird place hours later or whatever. So much time later has passed. And I think those just aren't really discussed enough unless they go through, and we'll talk about this, the very controversial step of regression therapy. Those, tend to get swept under the rug because they're not nearly as sexy, right? As like going on ship and being talked to and stuff like that. So again, there's a pretty wide range of examples of what these abduction stories look like. And everybody seems to have their own opinion about what they think is happening in these instances. So we're going to kind of cover, this is just a general topic. We're going to kind of get into those generalities about alien abductions, theories about what's happening there, why it's happening, what people think may be happening or not happening. And we're just kind of have a little we're just gonna kind of have a little chit chat. Just me and Tobias, two buddies, talking about alien abduction. No big deal.
Sure, maybe some aliens will pop in. You never know.
Might be some aliens.
If
Tobias,
they do, they will not knock.
they won't. No, they'll just show up. You know, it's good thing I'm already naked. You know, it's whatever.
True. Yeah, I've been masturbating this whole time. Is that weird? I hope not.
That's how you summon them. it's sex magic, right?
Man.
Sex magic 101.
Sure.
So anyway, Tobias, do you have any favorite alien abduction cases that we can just kind of, we're not going to get deep dive into any of them today, but just kind of, you know, what's your favorites?
Sure. Oh, I mean, you know, all of the classics.
All of them.
Like we
all
covered
of the abductions.
Pascagoula. Right. It's true. No, I mean, honestly, like the abduction phenomenon in reading about it, that was one of the very early things that I discovered as a little kid when I became interested in these topics, trying to learn more about the things that were happening in my own life. And it did resonate on a certain level because, as I mentioned, a lot of the things that I had experienced were similar to what these abductees or experiencers or whatever you want to call them were experiencing. And so, yeah, from a pretty early age, I think I was equal parts terrified and fascinated by the abduction phenomenon. But yeah, you know, like that. So that did lead me, I think, to being familiar with all of the hits. You know, like I said, we already covered Pascagoula. You know, I remember Whitley Strieber's work was pretty formative for me when I was a kid, reading about that kind of stuff.
You read about Whitley Strieber's abduction when you were a kid?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
no,
wow.
I think I was probably in grade school, and that, like that one in particular, because so much of the stuff that he wrote about, everything but the being taken aboard alien spaceships, you know, I would be like, oh yeah, no, I know what that's like, you know, like, oh yeah, I've had something similar. So yeah, like that was a big one, you know, like Strieber's work, especially back then.
Then he's like, and then they put a probe up my butt, and you're like, I don't know anything about that. This is weird. Close the book and move on.
I missed out on that. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of butt stuff, which, you know, is whatever. And honestly, like, he gets a lot of shit for that.
He does. It created an entire piece of lore, and honestly, that's not typical in alien abduction stories.
Well, it's not, but it's also like we're talking about a human being who was violated.
Well, you're right. That's a good point.
It's, you know, whether or not you believe it, you know, he definitely seems to. And I don't know. I mean, at a certain point, like, aren't we kind of victim shaming, you know, like for making fun of him for that? Like what
Good
possible reason would he have to make something like that up? Like, he was already a writer, you know, he had to know before sharing that people were going to, like, you know, there was at least a risk. Yeah. That he was going to catch some shit for it. So why would you share that other than it just being part of the story, you know?
Yeah, very true. You ever watched Fried Berry?
Yeah, totally.
It's a fucking great movie. It's just, I'm not going to say anything else about it. Just people after the show, go watch Fried Berry. I promise. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah, see if they still have it on the Last Drive-In.
Ooh, yeah.
That's the way to watch it.
Yeah, definitely. But no, you're absolutely right. I apologize, Whitley Strieber, for being insensitive to your plights. You know, good points. Because he's still alive, isn't he?
Oh yeah,
I believe he is. Yeah, he's still doing Dreamland, isn't he? He's doing his whole thing. Probably. You know, he's that, but that is kind of of course, like I said, it created like a whole lore, which is so interesting,
Oh,
because
yeah.
that's the first thing you think of. You get probed by aliens. Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
I don't think I've ever heard of anybody else reporting that specific activity.
No,
Now there's lots of sexual activity. So
there
another
is.
one of my favorites, which I think people will recognize, is the OG Antonio Villas Boas.
Yeah.
All the way back in 1957, he was a Brazilian farmer who was out on his tractor one night. Long story short, he gets abducted by beings in this egg-shaped craft. They take him on board. They like lube up his whole body for some reason, and then they gas him like with this weird gas that makes him feel sick. And then they bring in this like weirdly attractive alien human hybrid looking lady, and they end up having sex. And she like does this thing at the end where she points at her stomach and then points up like towards the stars, I guess, because she's silent the whole time, by the way.
Yeah.
Which is weird. I think we've all been there where you're just like, are you even into this? You are so quiet. Like, what is happening? But anyway, so I guess she was trying to indicate, or at least he assumed she was trying to like indicate that she was pregnant and that his child was going to be born in the stars. So I don't know. Maybe we can thank that for all of the human hybrid alien, narratives that exist within the
I don't
the
think
field
we've
of
covered that
ufology now.
story yet, but we definitely need to. It is a classic.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely. Well, and then there's the fucking the Love and Saucers guy who has fathered a million alien babies. We'll talk about him eventually. I can't remember his fucking name. If you guys haven't watched Love and Saucers, check that out. We'll cover it too. Yeah, no, he's
David Huggins.
there it is. Yep, that's his name.
Yeah.
He's fathered a bunch of alien babies with his relationship with that's where the mantis cucks come from.
Yeah. Well, he was having. Yeah. I guess he was having relations with a lot of similar alien babes. As Villas Boas was, at least based on his testimony and very graphic paintings.
It's very graphic paintings.
Good for him.
I'm gonna get one and hang it right in my room, right by the bed.
Yeah. I would love that. I would love to have one and have it just be the first thing people see when they enter my house. It's just David Huggins. Yeah, because there's one where like he's on his back in the woods and there's like the alien gray lady who's on top of him. Like that one. People come in and just see that. I just picture them like come in, like don't even take their hat or coat off, just walk in, see that, turn around, walk right back out.
This is the kind of vibe you can expect here in the Wayland house.
Right. Well, this is clearly a house of degeneracy. I think I'll see myself out. And they would be correct. Yeah, it is.
Imagine trying to hire like any contractor at all. Then you get one and he's like, oh, that happened to me. Oh no.
Right. Like all the neighbor kids at Halloween, or like we just become known as the alien sex house. Because every time we open the door to hand out fucking candy, there's just that painting. Yeah.
And you get the big one too. The biggest print you can get of it.
Absolutely.
Anyway, no, it's a fantastic story. I mean, he seems to believe it, I mean, I can't tell you whether or not that's happening to him, but to him, it's very real. And that's kind of more so, I guess, what we should focus on when it comes to these abductees, because whether or not you believe their stories, they're very real for them, or at least they seem to be. There's not a lot of people who are going to come out and make that their entire personality, just for the lulz, right? Just because. Like, right. It's not like me and Tobias both know, it's not like there's a lot of money in this field. It's not like there's a lot to be had from it. It's very small.
It's true.
Probably anybody that's in it, between the both of us, me and Tobias, have probably met everyone.
Yeah, at some point,
At
basically.
some point, right? Fans and researchers and experiencers alike. I mean, I'm sure between the two of us, we've probably met everybody. Because it's really not that big of a community. It seems like it is to you guys, but it's not. And I mean, there's just really no gain for these people. Some people even experience adverse effects, coming out with these stories. We just talked about it. Willie Strieber, he's known as the guy that got probed by aliens. That's what he's known for. That's what Whitley Strieber's known for. Nobody ever talks about any of the other weird stuff that happened, right, with his story. They just talk about him getting sexually assaulted by aliens. What kind of who wants that legacy? Nobody really wants that.
Right.
I definitely have my favorites. Pascagoula's really cool.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Betty and Barney Hill, of course, even though I have some issues with Betty and Barney Hill because I have issues with regression therapy.
Right.
At the end of the day, I do think something happened to them. And I think that there's enough evidence for me personally to deem it as credible. There's some that I take issue with. Travis Walton. I have issues with this story. I do.
Yeah.
I do. Oh, well, I'll talk about it one day.
Right. We should. I used to like that story a lot. I really, really did. I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was very credible.
I did too. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to say anything on this show, really.
That's okay.
I've heard some things, that that call some of this into question, and yeah, I don't know. We're not doing an episode on Travis Walton specifically right now, so I don't think we should get into it. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I just am not as enamored with it as I once was.
Here's the thing about it. I can sit here and tell you guys I don't think that Travis Walton was abducted by aliens. It doesn't change not one fucking thing about Travis Walton's life and legacy. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
Just like with any of these other abductees that you don't know about, because there's so fucking many that you don't know about, that I don't know about. I can almost guarantee it that this is probably a very underreported phenomena. And for one, like I said, kind of in the beginning here, because of the missing time, something happened to them. They don't know what happened to them. Why talk about that, right? One time I was out fishing and then all of a sudden it was 6 hours later. Who the fuck are they going to talk to about that? Except for maybe their grandkids or something one day, I think that it is severely, underreported. And I think that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what our opinions are about what we think happened to them, because we don't fucking know. We have no way of knowing or not knowing if it did or did not happen to them. And it doesn't change them still telling their story, and it shouldn't. These people should still continue to tell their story, no matter what people think about their story.
True.
So, kind of getting into that a little bit, because like I just said, anybody could wake up one day and go, oh, I was abducted by aliens last night. And then they could tell this whole story. And that's what it is. You either believe them or you don't, right? There's no evidence that they did, and there's no evidence that they didn't. Sometimes some people come back with implants or weird burn marks or, things like that. That does happen. But for the most part, you can't prove or disprove that it did or did not happen to them. So it's kind of probably one of the easiest phenomena to fake. However, there is some academia at play here. And we should talk about that a little bit, of course.
Okay.
Tobias, I'm sure you're familiar with John Mack.
It's funny you mentioned that, because sitting right next to me, I just knocked some dowsing rods on the floor trying to do this. But sitting next to me is my hardcover edition of Abduction by John E. Mack, MD.
Yep. And he is, I feel like severely underrated when it comes to this topic. I'll be completely honest with you. I know there's some people that are like really into this stuff and they're like, man, he knows that's the guy. But the thing about John E. Mack is that, again, there is academia here, and it's a really interesting story. So John Mack was a psychiatrist. He's actually a Pulitzer Prize winner. He won a Pulitzer Prize, not for alien abduction. However, he was the head of the Department of Psychiatry at fucking Harvard. I'm not that. I don't have those kind of accolades, right? I mean,
I
the guy's
mean, yeah,
impressive.
no, I get what you're saying. Like, he has an impressive resume.
He does. He does have an impressive resume. And he gets into these alien abduction cases, but he gets into it from a psychological point of view. And he has written some books about the subject. You should definitely check them out. But what's interesting about him is that he started off as fully prepared to find a reasonable psychological explanation behind these people and their experiences. Like he didn't plan to go into this, it's not like at the end of the day he was like, oh yeah, it's definitely aliens and they're taking people, because that's not what he ends
Right.
up the conclusion he ends up coming to. However, he goes into this as a skeptic. He's not a UFO guy, right? That's not his claim to fame here. So John Mack goes into it and he really struggles for a long time and kind of calls upon other because I think when he started sitting down with abductees and talking to them, I think he expected like really like obviously crazy people, and you know what I mean, the type,
Yeah.
and that's not what he got. He ended up getting people who were genuine, seemed to be of sound mind at every other aspect of their life. Just they've had these very strange experiences. And, like I said, I don't think he ever really came out and said, yeah, it's definitely aliens, but he's definitely come out and said, look, something's happening to these people and we should be paying attention to that. To the point, I mean, he ended up getting so deep in the shit that that Harvard, he almost like lost his tenure at Harvard
Tenure. Yeah.
because he was into ufology, and they did this full investigation. They thought that maybe he was acting irresponsibly by even entertaining the idea that what these people were experiencing was real. And at the end of the day, Harvard did drop their investigation. They reinstated his tenure, and said, okay, there's really nothing unethical going on here. I mean, so you have some of the smartest minds in the entire country that, again, they're not saying aliens are real. They're not saying aliens are a thing, but they have nothing good to go against the science that's at play here. And that's amazing. I think that's awesome.
Oh, I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, John Mack is easily one of the most credible individuals that I have encountered since becoming interested in this subject, decades ago. And I we should do an entire episode just on him,
Yes.
frankly.
Yeah.
And I don't know what else there is to say about it without, veering sharply into what would just become an episode about John Mack. But yeah, I think you made a very important point very early on, in that he's not somebody you hear about a lot anymore. And I suspect it's because, unfortunately he passed away like 20 years ago. And what happens in this field way too often is, if people aren't around to keep talking, they just get forgotten about, because I'm going to say something that is going to come as a huge shock to everybody. But most people in this field do not do their research. So I would not at all be surprised to find out that there are a lot of people, way too many people, who don't have any idea who John Mack is and what he did and any of his work, because he's not still around to be a part of the industry that drives this research. Like, don't get it twisted, folks. It's not the research driving the industry here. It's the industry driving the research.
Yeah.
And I think that that explains a lot of the issues that exist within ufology. But that's probably it, because his work is very well documented. He wrote some very successful books. He was certainly very well known in his field. When he was alive, he was popular in the media. His work was definitely covered. So the only excuse that people have at this point would just be, I don't know, amateur hour bullshit, not doing their research. Like there isn't an excuse. Because he was a big deal, and I think that we'll probably see the same thing happen to a lot of people that I consider to be very credible. Like Jacques Vallée. He's hanging in there, right? But none of these guys are getting any younger. It's the same thing with Stanton Friedman. He passed away not that long ago, really, in the grand scheme of things. But it doesn't take very long for the content cycles to refresh and for people to be forgotten about when their work isn't profitable to the people driving this industry right now. There's always a chance that he'll be rediscovered like John Keel or something similar, but that's just the nature of the beast. Like if you come into this expecting academia, you're going to be really fucking disappointed, because for every, Stanton Friedman or John Mack, there are a million grifters, so many fucking grifters. And that's who drives this entire industry. So
It's very true.
Yeah.
I feel like a disappointingly amount of people have no idea who Stanton Friedman is. It's fucking
probably.
sad, for all the work that they put out there. But no, really, I mean, if you really, if you're not just interested in the spooky, scary stories of abduction, and you want to get into the real shit of the people behind it and the potentials behind it, John Mack is where it's at. He's not even paying me to say this from Beyond the Grave. It's just the way it is. Like, he's the guy.
But if he wants to, yes, he can.
He can. And preferably he could do so by going to patreon.com/WednesdaysTalk. John Mack, come on, come join us.
That would be amazing, to be the first Patreon with a ghost member.
Don't say ghost member.
with a engorged ghost member.
A big old ghost member. John Mack coming in with his ghost member. Anyway, he is
horrible,
really impressive, and again, it is really interesting to get into. We probably should do an entire episode just on John Mack alone, and just even the Harvard stuff. I mean, that's so fucking interesting, how that was treated, and it's a great tale of stigma, right, with these topics, and it just goes to show why science has had such a hard time, why academia has not really had a place in the paranormal, because they've all made it so fucking difficult to do so,
Right.
So
like, to put this in perspective, everybody has probably heard of the Ariel School UFO incident, right? This was back in 1994. There was a UFO sighting outside of the Ariel School in Zimbabwe. It's like one of the most famous it's one of the most famous UFO incidents ever. Like, it's I think it had a documentary not that long ago. Well, John Mack is the guy who gave that incident a lot of his credibility, because he went and interviewed those kids himself.
Yeah.
And found them to be credible in the sense that they seemingly had experienced something that perhaps was not easily explainable.
Yeah, he was the guy for that. Like, that was, he's so if you've heard of that, you've heard of John Mack. But a lot of times I get what happens with these things. People are like, and then all these kids saw this UFO, and then ufologists went and interviewed all of them, and then they just skip over the name entirely, right? Like, that's what happens with a lot of these things. But no, really, I mean, there are certain people that you should pay attention to. John Mack, he's not doing anything anymore, as far as I know, but except for
fingers crossed, maybe
hanging out on our Patreon, jerking his ghost member, but
oh, god damn it, too soon.
Well, we just told him that you have to summon the aliens with masturbation, I guess. So now
That's
he knows.
true.
He's got to try it out for us. Anyway, but still very important player, especially in abductee cases. And of course, everybody else and their mother, tried to go against John Mack. So one of the things that you'll hear a lot when people speculate, well, okay, if they're not actually being abducted by aliens and they're not making it up, then what is it that's happening? So some other, probably the number one explanation that I've heard is sleep paralysis. And we've kind of talked
Yeah.
about that before because Tobias, you kind of know how it is to have an experience invalidated with something like sleep paralysis. I'm sure you have thoughts on this.
Sure. Oh, I absolutely do. I mean, sleep paralysis is a known phenomenon, and I don't doubt its existence. I think it's a thing that happens to people, but it exists within ufology, or it exists specifically within the alien abduction phenomenon as weather balloons and swamp gas do in the greater realm of ufology. It is a common lazy as fuck explanation for anything that people just don't want to spend the time actually trying to understand. Like I know some of my experiences, people have suggested that even when I started off with like, hey, I know what sleep paralysis is. I wasn't paralyzed. This lasted too long to be like a hallucination. I wasn't in a dream state. Like I trust me, I was there. People will still say, "Oh, well, could it have been sleep paralysis?" And it's like, motherfucker, I just told you why it wasn't. You clearly weren't listening. Like if you're going to take this seriously, like just let's just not even talk about it. You
just
know,
pull a David Lynch and just no, and leave it at that.
right? Like seriously, and it gets frustrating. The other thing about sleep paralysis is I think it explains some of the how, but it doesn't really explain the why. I mean, and often I think that is the frustration that people in this field have with certain materialist, like scientific explanations for things. If, for instance, there is an element of the paranormal, be that, ghosts or cryptids or alien abduction, whatever, that is interacting with us sort of directly on the level of or through consciousness, then I think at least entertaining the idea of sleep paralysis as a medium for interaction is worthwhile. Because you hear some of the stories that people have had during sleep paralysis, and it it sure seems like there could be something more to it, right? And now I'm not saying that definitively, of course. I think people, well, hopefully people know by now not to mistake my speculation for belief when I'm discussing things. But I think it's an interesting idea. And I think that sleep paralysis, while it may on its surface seem like an easy and convenient explanation for a number of paranormal phenomena, isn't. Once you scratch that surface, once you get a little bit deeper, you'll come to understand that not only does the majority of what people are describing not really fit neatly into that sleep paralysis box, but sleep paralysis itself might be weirder than we actually give it credit for.
Yeah.
So Yeah, it's just not the easy explanation people want it to be.
So, well, and there's just so much about it that just it doesn't track, right? Sleep paralysis. Well, the number one uh thing there is you know, paralysis. And even though some
Right.
abductees do mention paralysis, um a lot of them don't, right? They're still able to move and shit. Walking onto ships and walking around ships and there's no paralysis going on there. Sometimes people will say that, some of these instances is like, well, I was laying in bed and then all of a sudden, the aliens came and there was a flash and I don't remember anything else. And I woke up and I was in bed again, or I woke up, I was in my kitchen or whatever. Um, so of course, in that instance, I suppose maybe potentially could be sleep paralysis. I don't know. But let me tell you, I'm gonna challenge you guys to sit down and you probably won't be able to, but talk to an abductee. I mean, really, get into a room with one, sit there, and the most impactful one that I remember, I'll call him Jay because he's anonymous, who was sharing his experience with me. This did not happen in the middle of the night. It happened in the afternoon. He had already been awake for a couple of hours. And while he's telling me what happened to him, I mean, this is a man, he's probably, just under 40, and he's shaking. Like he is, like his hands can't stop shaking, and his voice is breaking because he's trying to hold back tears. And like, you're gonna sit there and tell me that this just happened because his brain went whoops and fucked up, like in the middle of
Right.
sleeping, because that's just not the case here. I mean, that it just doesn't fit, and I agree, it is probably just a very convenient explanation at times. Anyway, so yeah, I would love to see some of the skeptics sit in a room with a genuine, abductee and fucking try to look them in the face and tell them that what they experienced wasn't real. Good luck.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and well, just to be clear too, I probably should have done this right off the bat, but for anybody out there listening, because not everybody necessarily will, who isn't familiar with sleep paralysis, as mentioned, it is a very real phenomenon. So while we are asleep, our brains are under the effect of this natural chemical that our bodies produce that paralyzes us, so we aren't acting out our dreams and hurting ourselves all the time. Um, and it is possible for you to either be falling asleep or waking up. So hypnagogic or hypnopompic states, for you to be under the influence of this chemical and thus paralyzed, while also in like a half waking, half dreaming state. That's the hypnagogic or hypnopompic states. And as a part of those states, you might experience some mild hallucinations. If you've ever been falling asleep and you thought you heard your name, or you experienced like the feeling of like falling and like kind of like started yourself awake or something, then you know what I'm talking about, because like those can be a part of those altered states that we are constantly in, um, or at least often in. And so that's what people are talking about when they're talking about sleep paralysis. It doesn't normally last very long. One thing that is common amongst hallucinations of all types is that they are very short lived. And so, other like outside of some very specific, very easy to diagnose mental conditions, people are not under the effect of long term hallucinations, not long enough for an entire alien abduction. Certainly not through sleep paralysis. So there's just lots of reasons why it doesn't add up. But if you were wondering what sleep paralysis is and kind of the layman's terms of how it works, that's basically it.
yeah. Another explanation people like to use, I'll agree, is a little more plausible: lucid dreaming. Some of the skeptics
Okay.
believe that these are lucid dreamers. that they are, and there's actually been studies done on, seeing if people can recreate alien abductions during lucid dreaming, um, you know, episodes, I suppose. Now, I've never been a lucid dreamer. Actually, I don't dream a lot, anyway, so I'm probably not a good candidate for it. I don't really know the ins and outs of it, but for people that don't know, lucid dreaming is basically you have complete control of your dreams. Um, there are some weird paranormal things that could come with lucid dreaming, potentially, maybe. It's kind of a strange phenomena in and of itself. And so some believe that, some of these abduction cases are simply that. They seem very real because the person's kind of in control, but sometimes, some of the alien abduction cases do kind of have like a dream-like quality to them. And that would explain why time still passes in the real world. That would explain why they remember some parts and not others. Like I said, a little more plausible, but I'm just still not buying it completely.
Sure, but even using that as an explanation doesn't dismiss the potential for like some element of this to be paranormal,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, again, it's just kind of lazy, I think, for people to dismiss it as lucid dreaming. They're like, oh, no, it's cool. It's just this other largely misunderstood phenomenon that we don't know a lot about. Don't worry about it. It's just that mystery thing. Like, well, what the fuck? Like that doesn't explain anything. Like, first of all, if you can control your dreams, you're probably not willingly going to like create an abduction scenario for yourself because those universally fucking suck. But beyond that, I don't think it's unreasonable to speculate that there could be an aspect of the abduction phenomenon. I mean, we already touched on the parapsychological phenomena that often accompany it or are reported to accompany it. And so I don't think that we would be terribly off base in suggesting that there could be an aspect of this that does sort of interact with us directly through our consciousness, right? So sort of a parapsychological effect or using consciousness as a medium. And so just using this dream state as a get out of weird free card to explain why, oh no, it's this totally normal thing, just don't worry about it. It just doesn't sit well with me because what if, for the sake of argument here, what we're dealing with is some sort of disincarnate intelligence, right? This sort of this being of consciousness or something that interacts, as I mentioned, directly through consciousness as a medium that would use something like a dream state to interact with us. And so there still is this external force that is driving this this so-called lucid dreaming state. I mean, that's still alien abduction, like that's still fucking crazy and not something we're doing to ourselves that we probably need to learn a little bit more about. So yeah, I don't love those kinds of explanations. It's just lazy. Just do better.
Well, and I'm gonna give you guys some objective fact. Are you ready for this? This is a fact. You ready?
Sure.
Objective fact. Alien abductions, just like how alien abductions don't always involve anal probing, alien abductions don't only happen when you're laying in bed trying to go to sleep for the night. Pascagoula,
What?
they were out there fishing. Betty and Barney Hill were driving home from vacation. Even Travis Walton, believe it or not, they're working.
Right. And I mean, we mentioned actually every single one that we've mentioned so far, other than Whitley Strieber, because Antonio Villas-Boas was driving a tractor.
Right.
So he wasn't asleep.
These are the abductee I was telling you about. Jay, his was the middle of the day. He's hanging out with his 2 dogs on his day off work, watching TV. He had already
Yeah.
slept for the whole night. It was his day off. He wasn't sleep deprived. I mean, sleep doesn't even come in as a factor here with these things, and sure, yes, I've been sleep deprived before. I'm sure Tobias has. I'm sure everybody has at one point in their life, and you could just fall asleep just about anywhere. But they don't mention that in any of these situations. They're not like, well, yeah, I was just on a bender for 3 days straight, and all of a sudden I was abducted by aliens. It's not.
Right.
These are just people doing their regular everyday life, and all of a sudden it fucking completely changes. So explain that one, skeptics. I already know you're just going to be like, well, it just doesn't happen because it's not real. Okay, that's fine. You're wrong, but okay.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Wrong podcast, I guess. I don't know what you're doing here. But,
could those things explain some instances of alien abduction? They absolutely can. Just like some people can see a mangy bear and think it's a dog man or whatever, right? Misidentification and misrepresentation of situations happens. We talk about that a lot here. However, it doesn't check off all the boxes for all the cases across the board. And that's perfectly fine and reasonable. You can have instances where people believe they were abducted, they weren't really, and here's a prosaic explanation for it. But that still leaves all the rest, right? to sort through and figure out.
Right. I think that we can both agree that the issue isn't that there are rational explanations for some things. Yeah. It's when those rational explanations are applied inappropriately in lieu of actually investigating someone's experience that we start to run into problems. So just don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that, Chet. I don't want to stretch this out too long, but I do want to get into the topic of regression therapy because it is such a pivotal point in alien abduction cases. For people that don't know, regression therapy basically is when you have these people with missing time, or missing time, like in the Betty and Barney Hill case. Betty was having nightmares, about what she perceived, what we think she perceived may have happened during their missing, because they didn't remember anything about what happened to them. They remember the ship, and then they don't remember anything else after that. And that's probably the most popular case of regression therapy that we have. So basically what happens is you, under the care of a hypnotist, you go under, and they kind of pull these memories out. Regression therapy isn't just for alien abduction, by the way. They have used it for like trauma and things like that. You certainly can utilize that if you'd like, but it can be very controversial. And the reason why it's controversial is because it depends on how it's done. You can kind of lead these people to admit to things that never happened and never took place, and lead them to actually believe that that's what happens on your own as a hypnotist, right? So it kind of depends on who is doing the work and how much you trust that person to do the work.
Right.
Which is why it's not an exact science. I mean, it is definitely its own thing. I mean, anybody that's going to get into hypnotism and doing that, if you intend on doing it for the purpose of this, you have to be careful. And while we try not to take down other people, I'm sorry, you guys, but like I do have to talk about it. The most credible source for how unreliable it is, I'll give them credit, comes from the Newkirks, when they very unethically hypnotized somebody into believing that they were abducted by aliens when they actually weren't. So
yeah, that doesn't seem great.
It's really fucked up, but they proved that they could do it, which proves that anybody can do it. Right? Taking somebody who's not an abductee and making them believe that they are, and that kind of blows up the science of regression therapy a little bit, because that just goes to show how influential the hypnotist can be in that time. Tobias, do you have any strong opinions about regression therapy?
Yeah, well, I think fundamentally the thing that you've got to understand about regression therapy or regression hypnosis, whatever, is that it does not, and by its very nature, as described so far, cannot ever constitute good evidence of an alien abduction. If you happen to have a hypnotist that you really trust and you think is great, and they're out there doing hypnotic regression, and you find that work fascinating, okay, awesome, like more power to you. But if you try to present that as definitive evidence of a real phenomenon, it's going to be largely dismissed, and you just got to be okay with that, because for all of the reasons that Asher's already mentioned, I shouldn't have to tell you why at this point. So yeah, it just is what it is. I tend to try to avoid any cases that rely on that too much. I'm not familiar with the case you're talking about with the Newkirks. I'd like to know more about that. You know, before I really form a strong opinion on it. Like, for instance, I would want to be sure that the whole thing wasn't just staged.
Well, it could be. Yeah, that's fair. It definitely. I mean,
So
we don't
who
know. I
knows?
wasn't there.
No, one, it seems in line with other things that I have seen. So
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Well, because I mean, it's either it was staged and you have to admit that you staged it and you fucked up, or you have to admit that you purposefully gave somebody a traumatic event. Like you caused trauma on
yeah,
somebody. So either way, like that's fucked up. Just
saying it was staged would cost them way more money.
it,
So
fair.
I think that's an easy choice.
But you know what? Even if it was staged, that's it. That is definitely in line with something that could happen during hypnotism. As far
Yeah.
as it could be a really fantastic tool for people, again, for many different things. As crazy as I know that sounds, but hypnotism is a super neat topic. You should definitely look into. But we don't have a lot of academics really throwing a bunch of money at it. So take it with a grain of salt. It's probably not going to cure you or give you all the answers that you're looking for. In fact, again, regression therapy when it comes to trauma can be very damaging to your psyche. So, don't do that, right? Um, yeah, like I said, and that's like my biggest gripe. That's my only gripe with the Betty and Barney Hill case is because it does rely very heavily on their regression hypnosis and how that went. But there are other things about the case that correlates to it, right? She had the fucking slime or whatever, the mantis cum in her dress, and they had the fucking circles on the car, and I mean they had other physical evidence, that
Barney's genital warts.
Barney's genital warts. Yeah, where'd that come from? Who knows?
Only aliens.
Only aliens.
I mean, aliens have given me genital warts like 5 or 6 times, according to what I told my wife.
5 different
Oh,
types of
God.
galactic genital warts.
Yes. These goddamn aliens keep giving me chlamydia. I don't know why.
People have probably used that. People have really probably used that.
Right.
Oh, gosh. But
Perfect
yeah, I
crime.
mean, the fact that they're an interracial couple and they were publicly, out and about during that time, that's a big deal. Different things, kind of help. I'll forgive the regression therapy because it's not the only thing the case is built on. But yeah,
Right.
I'm also skeptical about it, as you should be in cases like this. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what other key components to alien abduction I'm missing. We've talked a lot about a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a good overview of the phenomenon itself. I mean, really to dig much deeper into it, I think what we would want to do is we would want to have some episodes dedicated to specific cases
Yeah.
and specific individuals. Like if you want to talk more about regression therapy or hypnotic regression, whatever people are calling it, then I mean, we could do a whole episode on like Bud Hopkins. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that would teach people more about that shit than they ever wanted to know.
Yeah, we didn't even mention Bud Hopkins at all. during this episode.
No. Well, there's so many people. There's so
Yeah.
many notable individuals in this field, and so many of them have contributed some foundational principles. I mean, Bud Hopkins pioneered hypnotic regression. Without him, I don't think it would exist to the level that it does within ufology. I really don't. Like when he wrote Missing Time, or actually Intruders and then Missing Time, like those were a big deal. Like those were really influential works. So anyway, but yeah, I mean, in terms of, I think in overview of the phenomenon, I'm pretty comfortable with this. I think that we can and will dig deeper into specific aspects of it through case study and episodes on specific contributors. But otherwise, I mean, we could talk for hours and hours about this.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think of all the cases we mentioned, the only one that we've done together was Pascagoula. I know we've done a Betty and Barney Hill episode, but not you and I. But there's one on the show. So I mean, so even just like the heavy hitters, right? The classics. We definitely still have a lot to cover, but there's only so many Wednesdays, and then we slack off sometimes. It happens because there's like holidays and stuff.
Because we're human beings. Yeah.
Right, exactly. We're human beings. Sometimes you take a mental health day from work, right? It happens. But I'm sure we'll get into, plenty more in the future. And we will go from there. I mean, that's where we're at. So I guess that's where we'll leave it. This has been your overview of alien abductions. If you have been, or you believe you've been abducted by aliens, you can contact myself. You can contact Tobias Wayland. You can email the podcast on WednesdaysWeTalkWeird at gmail.com. You can call us 773-59-WEIRD. Or social media or whatever. I don't know. Everything's down in the description. Go read it. Read sometimes. It's good for you. But yeah, with that being said, guys, we'll see you back here next Wednesday.